Maybe you should tell an off-color joke, Ed.
Good evening, and welcome to the second meeting of the fiscal year for the Milton Planning Board. This meeting is being televised and recorded, and today is July 28, 2011. I'm Emily Innes, Chairman, and with me are
William Clark, Planning Director.
Alex Whiteside, I'm a member of the board.
Diane Holligan, Secretary.
Bernie Lynch, I'm a member of the board.
Pete Jackson, member.
Ed Duffy, member.
excellent. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the past minutes. We have the meeting minutes for July 14th, 2011. Does anybody have any corrections to these minutes? Changes?
I was delighted that they came out and it went through revision in advance so that people have a chance to see them.
Yep.
So I move that they be accepted.
Okay, do you have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Our next scheduled planning board meeting is August 25th. We will be here at 6:30 p.m. And our next item on the agenda is Citizens Speak. Now, we will be having a hearing for 131 Elliott Street. So you can, if you're here for that, you can confine your comments to the hearing, or you can let us know now. Welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Margaret Donovan, 41 Central Avenue, and I'm here to discuss the parking situation on the 36 Central side of the street. The other morning, I heard the trash pickup, and I said, am I missing something? It's not our scheduled day. Looked out, it was actually the trash pickup for the wine shop. However, it caused me to look out, and I observed two unsettling things. Number one, the family that lives in 46 Central is a very nice Haitian family. The boy went out in the morning to pick up the orange card off of his car. He apparently did not know, and I don't think the family knew, that there is no overnight parking in Milton. So this was unsettling to me and to him, especially when I then observed two cars pull up directly in front of 36 Central, and they now have 4 spaces there. And I watched. I said, they're going to the MBTA, and sure enough, they did. One of them was a green satin. It was there from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6:30 that night. Another one was a black Saab, and that was there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock that night. The greens, they've been back there since then. I did go, not directly in front of 36. I did go to Karen and said, you know, if you're going to try to preserve these parking spots for your commercial buyers, I said, you've got to protect them because it's becoming a free MBTA parking area. So they've been parking there. And so the people who are getting on the MBTA have had to move somewhere else. Well, guess where they've moved? Just a little bit up the street. Because there's not one sign from the O'Neill building up to School Street. Not one parking sign. Now, I've lived in that neighborhood long enough to remember when there were. And there were 2-hour signs. But how can anybody monitor the situation without any notice to the people there? Even though my poor unfortunate neighbor, he didn't have notice and he got the orange tag. I did speak to Mr. Clark about it, and I know that he's working on it. I just thought that since Mr. Duffy at one point said that planning parking should be part of planning, that's why I'm bringing it up here. But I'm bringing it up here also so that it's known that this is what's going on, and it's not right.
Thank you very much for bringing our attention. Bill, has this been taken to the Traffic Commission? What's
I-
the
I actually
status of
took it
this?
to Brian Cherry, the police community officer, community liaison officer. The two of us did have a talk about it. We did go back and try to find what those signs were.
Mhm.
The police department and the the Department of Public Works do not have a database of where all these signs are.
Okay,
We have certain individuals who know where they are. We have a list of where the latest ones were put out. Starting next year, we will have a database, which is required by federal highway.
Next fiscal year, in other words, a year from now,
for next calendar year.
or next federal fiscal year.
How about next calendar year, since we already started it? But we should have it by 12. We should have everything in the
Oh, leap
computer
year.
ourselves. As for the neighbor's ticket, there's nothing I can do. I actually have, my daughter's car had one on hers a couple of nights ago too. So everybody's supposed to know, don't park in the street. You know, the car gets left there, it gets the ticket. He's not the first one in that neighborhood. We've had a bunch. That's the same issue all over town, not just there. I
What
know
about
the traffic
enforcement?
commission. Traffic commission will address putting signs back up in
Okay.
that area. When Lieutenant Cherry and I went through looking for what signs were there, we couldn't find any in the past.
Okay.
When I went through with Joe Lynch and we went through different places, we couldn't find any. And that goes back to the installation of the sidewalks down in the Central Ave area.
Mhm.
Since then, we have seen no signs between Brook Hill and school. So we will address it next traffic commission meeting, and we'll give it back to the selectmen.
And in the meantime, what is the enforcement practice in there? Do they do a sweep and check, or is it just dependent on who's going by? How does that work?
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm
I
not the
think
police.
2 hours of parking seems excessive.
Well, that'll be for the traffic commission to
understand that, but
decide.
I would think 1 hour in the business district would be
Sufficient.
maximum.
Depends on people wanting to go for their coffee at either Cakes or Radio Central. They may want to stay an extra hour, so that would have to be taken into consideration. All right, anybody else wishing to speak at Citizen Speak? Next item on our agenda is a zoning discussion with the building commissioner, Joe Prondak. Welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Joe Prondak, Building Commissioner. I'm just here to bring a couple of housekeeping issues, possibly, that I've intended to bring in front of you for a long, long time and just haven't gotten to it yet. The first is, our office does get not so much complaints, but inquiries, let's say a dozen times a year, rough estimate, of, can my neighbor put an air conditioning condenser right on his property line or right next to his house, within the required setback areas. And we've gone back and forth with this a little bit over the last couple of years as to whether or not this is an accessory structure. And in reality, it is equipment. And I'm just wondering if the planning board wanted to consider, wanted to consider including that in the definition of, that type of equipment in the definition of accessory structures.
Okay.
Freestanding air conditioners, not the kind you'd put in your window, certainly, but the freestanding condensers. Pool heaters can be noisy, pool pumps can be noisy.
Right.
I always cringe a little bit when we're issuing a pool permit and wondering where the pumps and everything else are going, and will I get complaints?
Can you put a little fence around them, a sound fence? I mean, we could require that if it was effective.
There are sound deadening fences for that type of equipment, but I'm not sure how it affects. Some air conditioning people might say that it'll affect the operation if you don't have free circulation of the air, or the same with the heaters. So it's not a dire issue that I'm bringing in front of you, but
They have generators too, Joe, gas generators for a lot of people getting those things. in
yep,
case their power
that,
goes out.
and that, right, that
Might
could be
include
a further consideration.
And you're looking at this for the May annual town meeting rather than for a special?
Oh, yeah.
When
Or
you,
totally up to you guys. I just
Right.
want to bring it, if it stays the same, we'll probably end the debate and just simply not consider them accessory structures and allow them to go wherever.
when you review plans, do you, as a matter of course, note where these things are and ask, ask them to review
When,
locations or
for
something?
example, if a pool is going in, certainly we would ask where the equipment's
Where they
going.
plan to put it?
If an addition's going on and air conditioning is part of that,
Should show
we
on the
we
plan.
would ask, but a lot of times, air conditioning gets installed
Right, after the
without
fact. Yeah.
an addition that would trigger a review necessarily by anybody.
So a question, can the pool go in the setback area?
The pools can be within, pools are considered accessory structures, so they get the reduced setback of, residence C, for example, I can say for sure is 8 feet and 8 feet from side and rear lines, 40 from the front, so front yards are typically not an issue. But it can go.
Basketball net?
We don't regulate them. You might want to add that too.
He's looking at mechanical equipment rather than,
Yeah, but basketball courts, nets, those types of things, we don't consider those as accessory structures.
and then you had a second,
And then the second one is would the board consider some clarification of language with respect to commercial vehicles parking in residential districts?
okay,
And more specifically, the section does say that no person shall park a commercial vehicle on any lot. And at the moment, we do consider streets lots independent unto themselves for the purpose of enforcing this section. Because we've had over my tenure here, a lot of taxi cabs, livery service vehicles that don't necessarily, a cab, for example, may work the night shift and park the vehicle there during the day, so the overnight parking rule doesn't apply.
Right.
Yet it's still a commercial vehicle that's regularly parked and garaged in a residential district. And clarification to that language would be helpful to administration of that section.
So to cover streets.
Yes.
And it seems to me that that would be a general bylaw.
Well, it's in the zoning bylaw now. My suggestion would be to just simply change the language from on any lot to in any residence
I mean,
district.
the lot has to do with the zoning of the lot,
Mhm.
whereas parking on the street is really the police power. In other words, the zoning doesn't really, interesting question. I don't think the zoning directly applies to streets. What you can do on the street.
Well, in this
In
particular
other words,
case,
you
I
can drive your
do-
oil truck down the street, and you probably can park it while you make
Yes,
it
but
delivery.
we do make a distinction between parking to make a delivery, for example, and parking as in garaging or keeping your vehicle there.
In any event, we could get our learned town council to say whether we need two bylaws, one for streets, one for lots.
Right.
enforcement would be interesting. If you're talking about a cab that's parked on the street during the day versus a cab that's parked to pick somebody up. I mean, somebody would have to sit there and monitor the cab. You see what I mean? It's not going to be a drive-by, oh, there's a cab sitting there, I must therefore give them a ticket. It could be there for 10 minutes or half an hour waiting for somebody to come out.
Right.
Maybe it's arrived early. So if you're enforcing the street,
Mhm.
that's going to be difficult.
Well, we do, it,
Enforcing
but that's what we do.
But I'm not sure why you're enforcing the street. Enforcing what's in the driveway, I understand.
Mhm.
Enforcing the street, I'm wondering about that.
Because for example, the 400 or so complaints we've received in the last 2 years, about 40% of those are commercial vehicles.
Right.
And a substantial number of those are cabs, livery vehicles, and other vehicles that park.
But they're parking on the street and not on the driveway. You're getting complaints about cars that are being parked on the street
Mhm.
versus cars being parked in the driveway.
Right, and I consider them part of, I consider the zoning bylaw to encompass them now.
I think we would have to get clarification on that.
Mhm.
So for one thing, it'd make your life a lot easier if you could sit there and say, well, if it's on the street, it's nothing to do with me.
Right, but
So,
in that, the amount that I deal with, that may be viewed as sticking my head in the sand, which,
that's also a fair comment, so, but I think you deserve some clarification, so we could.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
sort of why I'm
Okay.
here. and-
But of course, it wouldn't hurt anything. If you want to enforce the streets, it seems to me
It would,
you should
and
be
this is
allowed
we-
to do so.
Do both, if it's mentioned both ways, it's belt and suspenders, and you're good to
Correct,
go when you go
Yeah.
to court.
correct.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that we probably could do this.
We could look at both of them. So if you're all in agreement for May.
And then we'll try and figure out about equipment, because of course, saying that has to be 8 feet away from the lot line doesn't help very much.
You could have it be allowed within the lot line if it's properly shielded too. That'd be another possibility.
Or maybe we could have a little decibel.
Noise bylaw?
Sort of like our wind turbines.
How difficult
And
would
we
a
could-
decibel level be
and-
to enforce?
and-
Decibels
Hard-
are, because decibels are read differently at different times of day, different humidities, different winds, decibel levels are
That would not
different.
be pleasant.
As simple as just saying, okay,
As part of the
70.
bylaw, we could ask for appropriation to get the building commissioner a decibel
A
meter.
meter.
I just borrow Quincy's.
He'd still have to read it all different times of the
We did
day.
extensive decibel studies at Marina Bay and Quincy for several years. and it's-
You'll need an assistant for that, won't you, Joe?
Yes, I would.
How big are they?
I'm
Decibel readers are about that big.
too bad. I'm thinking that it'd be somewhat easier to say if it's within the setback, it has to have shielding. If it's not within the setback, it doesn't. Or something of that sort. Something much easier to enforce than decibel levels.
Yeah, that would give some relief. Again, you know, in residency, they get closer naturally.
Right.
But some distance, I think,
Okay.
would give some relief to neighbors or some protection.
I'm sure we'll enjoy all debating it.
Okay,
Great.
great,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Now, originally on our agenda, although it's not on this agenda, we had scheduled a continued scenic road hearing from our last meeting. That is being opened for the purpose of continuing it to the 25th at 6:40. So the next item on our agenda is 131 Elliott Street. Come on forward.
I think I have all that. I think I have no comments.
August. Introduce yourselves for
Sure.
the record.
Warren Daniel, Daniel Architects. Connolly, applicant, 131 Elliott.
Welcome. So I understand you have some new information and new sketches for us.
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
Yeah. This is all there is for tonight, so it's, we're trying to kind of focus on the key areas that were being discussed, have been discussed. And primarily, we've made a couple of basic moves here. We're using the same footprint, building footprint, as we had in the original, not in what we called Scheme B, which was, you know, a few months ago. So this is back to the original submission. And we've moved the building back from Central Ave about 5 feet, and back from the track an additional 2 feet. So the track setback now is 10 feet along this wall, if it's easier to see here, along here, and then 18 feet where it jogs there. And in the front on Central Ave, it's varies a little bit, but in the corner here, it's 11 feet, and at this corner, it's about 14 feet. These are not exact dimensions, but close. And the sidewalk is, existing sidewalk is 8 feet wide, roughly. And so the setback, you can add 8 feet to that 11, and you get 19 here from the curb. And 22 from the curb here. I think that's an important consideration because there was a lot of thought and discussion at the last hearing that the building loomed, was right on the sidewalk, felt like there was no setback. So we pushed it back as much as we possibly could while still retaining the parking in the back, which we need for the overall parking count and the development. Graphically, this red dotted line shows the existing building, Hendry's Ice Cream. And you can see that, in fact, it does come right up to the property line in front and also all the way along the track side. It has a slight indentation right here, but it's basically on the property line along the tracks and along Central Ave. So comparatively, we're setting back 10 feet from the tracks and say 12 feet from Central Ave. So that setback, I think, is an important consideration. We put a context map here showing it at scale with the other surrounding buildings to give a better, I think, sort of scale to the whole thing. We hadn't done that before, but you can see the relative size of the buildings and the setbacks of each of the buildings. It's a little hard to read, but I think generally what you have is something that is about 10 feet, a 10-foot sidewalk, a 10-foot setback. Not 10-foot sidewalk, but a 10-foot setback. That's imprecise, but whereas we have roughly 20 feet, again, from the curb, not the property line. So we have roughly double what the surrounding properties seem to have. Now that isn't universal. Obviously, these houses have more setback, you can see. But it just puts it, I think, in easier context to see where the building is and what the massing is. And then the other big change is the elevations, and we have, this is falling here.
Humidity.
Humidity, yeah. It looked good about an hour ago. Basically, the moves we've made here are to really do a legitimate, literal mansard roof, not the mansard or quasi-mansard we were doing before. We're, as you can see, putting dormers everywhere for all the windows. This is a triple dormer. Most of them are double windows. We've shifted the windows a little bit from what we had before, but basically the size and openings are the same. The type of window, however, is different. They're double hungs with muntins at the top sash, 6, and then no muntins on the lower sash. So it's a 6/1. And we've added some detail to the cornice. These brackets, although we had brackets before, I think these are more prominent, and we're trying to kind of beef this up and create more of a shadow line with that cornice. Material-wise, the brick is still running all around the ground floor. And then on this 3-story wing, we have 2 stories of clapboard and then 1 story of mansard roof, which is a roof shingle. Probably, as I say in the narrative, is probably going to be a slate color. So slate and it's got beige and brick. And the same is true with this 4-story element, but we get an additional story in the clapboard right here. There's no, in this design, there's no band courses as we had before. I don't know if you remember, we had a band course running here, and we were thinking of differentiating the siding color a little bit down here from the rest of it. But the comment was made, and I think it's a good one, that it seemed to be kind of patchwork that way, and that this striation seems stronger to basically give it a base, a middle, and a cap. So essentially that's what we're doing. Oh yeah, we've added balconies too, real recessed balconies at not all but most. These ones right here and here wouldn't have them because of the commercial marquee band here, sign band, but virtually all the other ones have 4-foot deep and 14-foot wide recessed balconies.
You mentioned clapboards?
Yeah, that'll be hardy plank,
High plank, okay.
but it was a lap, what they call lap siding, but most people know it as clapboard.
Are you going to have balconies on obviously the riverside, is it going to,
Yeah.
we're looking forward
Yeah,
to that
right,
elevation. You're
right.
probably still
Coming
working
soon.
on it,
Okay.
but
Yeah, yeah.
I've got to say that I like the windows a lot.
Mhm.
In fact, I think that this sketch, this elevation is really quite attractive.
Mhm.
And so I think that you're making progress.
Mhm. Good. I like the sound of that.
Other comments? Yes,
I second Alex's remarks. I think it's a vast improvement.
Bernie, anything from you? No? Okay, Pete, any comments? And I've got a few too, so, Pete, on your
Just, well, I'm thinking of, to clarify the balconies, they will exist everywhere except these two right here. So the whole long facades of the tracks and the south facade.
Before I let Pete speak, just one quick note on that particular perspective elevation that you have. The side that faces Elliott Street, it doesn't actually match the site plan that you've given us, that setback right here. That setback, the next time you show it to us, that setback should be set back further, because you're showing the sidewalk. I'm assuming this is a sidewalk.
Yeah.
But you've actually got on your site plan, you've got a good amount of space. Looks like 23 feet
Yeah,
from the
there is.
sidewalk.
Well, what it is.
No, actually, it's
this-
further over, right next to
This
the
is
tower.
a courtyard, as you know,
Sunken
here.
courtyard.
Between.
Yeah, it doesn't read.
Right,
Yeah,
I know it
so-
doesn't. It was overlaid over the last rendering, and I think
Right.
there's a little more detail that needs to happen in here.
Okay.
Also, as you know, there's a veil and other stuff, but I just didn't want to
Exactly.
clog it up with,
As we get closer,
Oh.
again, for this first, new
Right,
step,
right.
as we get closer, that
Just
needs
a-
to be more refined.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
so. And the other thing that will need to be more refined is, I applaud putting this in context, that's
Mhm.
extremely helpful. We now need to see the three-dimensional in context.
mhm.
So again, as you move
Okay.
forward, how does this relate to the other buildings in
Right.
the area in three dimensions?
okay, we can do
So,
that.
Pete, I'll defer to you for the next round.
I think our comments at our last meeting, when we went over and started our comments, I think they were significant. And based on that, I expected a significant redesign of the project. I don't really see a redesign. The same building has been moved a couple feet, and there's been some changes to the skin of the building. But I don't think that addresses a lot of significant issues we had about the placement of the building on the site and the use of the site and site amenities and circulation and many of the more site planning issues that we had addressed. So I, for one, don't see this as a significant improvement. I think what we have to think of is we're not designing a building. We're designing a place. And this place has got to be a great place to live and work and shop and to meet your neighbors, et cetera. I think we're designing probably the linchpin of the redevelopment of this whole Central Avenue commercial zone. This is the biggest property. It's the one that's right on the square. In the Urban Land Institute study, they talked a lot about place and context and how this, and had some specific ideas about how this site can relate to this square. And they were talking a lot about creating a place that's important to this commercial district. And also it's a place that enhances, the neighborhood and the town. And I just don't think we have yet begun to recognize that aspect of the project and deliver on that. I think this is a site with great opportunity, and I think it requires vision in its redevelopment. And I don't see any sign of any vision for this site and what it means to the community.
Do you have some specific things that you'd like them to address? Some
Well,
specific ideas to?
I mean, I think all along I've been
Right.
talking about needing to do some site planning, but yet we have not once talked about any site planning issues yet, about, an analysis of the site itself, what opportunities, what things on that site can dictate how the site gets redeveloped. There's no sense of context on how it fits into the commercial district, into the residential district. I just think, we need to start more broadly than to design a building. I think we have to design a place.
One of the things that we had spoken about, you and I, Steve, at one of the meetings was you had mentioned that there were significant restrictions to placement of items on the site, the railroad tracks, the need for parking, where the residential was versus where the commercial was. I believe you had mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Milton Revitalization Committee had asked that you line up the commercial roughly with the commercial district.
Right.
And not spill into the residential district. So finding some way of addressing that to the entire board, whether it's a written statement or possibly a diagram that shows, railroad setback here, parking, mass requirements wherever, the actual resident, a line that actually shows the residential commercial lineup going across that might be a good way of helping us to visualize how I know you looked at the site, but we haven't seen how you visualize that in a diagrammatic form. More of a site analysis, I think, is what Pete is saying and what I think other members of the board have requested. And in your next set of drawings and sketches.
I think we've talked about it a little bit, but we kind of jumped to the reasons for this massing in this location. And I don't know if you want to get into that now, but I think we should demonstrate that more on a drawing.
Just to respond to a couple of those
Of
things.
course.
They did indicate that they can't move the building further into the site because they need room for that parking. I'm opposed to the notion of building a 36-car parking lot on grade at this location and having all that on-grade parking. Both has a very ugly addition to the neighborhood, and the vast majority of the parking from this development is exiting out onto Elliott Street, which is the residential street, versus Central Avenue. So I think a thinking of the parking, the traffic impacts, and what it means. So I don't buy the notion that that area has to be reserved for on-grade parking. Secondly, this notion of reserving everything in the residential district, there's nothing in the zoning that requires that. That perhaps was a suggestion of the Revitalization Committee, but there's nothing to indicate that that's got to be. I do think when we review the context of this building, we need to consider the residential setbacks and how the placement of the building relates to the residential area, but there's nothing that requires that all of this development happen on this side of the commercial area on the other side of the street.
Can I just get you to clarify something, because I think I'm maybe misunderstanding. Are you suggesting that the parking lot be physically on Central Avenue, all of the parking here?
No, I'm suggesting that a far greater percentage of the parking be included within the building rather than at grade parking.
And then my next question, okay, so that clarifies that part. I was worried for a second you wanted the parking lot to be visible from the street. So then the second question is, given that case and given the understandable wish of residents to have secured access to their parking and not also be sharing parking with people who are coming in and out. For example, 36 Central Avenue, the commercial parking is on the lot and the secured residential parking is within the building. how would you propose to address the idea
There
of
are
secured
lots of
residential?
precedents
Well,
for
that would be helpful to know.
securing parking within a building to segregate the private from the public and to manage that. So I don't think that's an overwhelming issue at all.
And then the third question is, actually, no, skip the third question. That would be fine. So does anybody else have any questions? Alex?
Well, it seems that to me that I was commenting, obviously, on the appearance of the building, and I've got to say and reiterate that I think it's really quite attractive, and I don't see all this detail in this elevation. I mean, obviously, circulation and retail space and this, that, and the other thing
We'll be getting
needs to be
there.
to be worked on. But I think that this is. I think that you know you're making progress in my view. Obviously, since you need 4 votes, you're going to want to tie this thing into its site so that it's a
Sure.
nice. And landscaping will.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I
will-
share your concern with the site. It's equally important.
One other consideration, I had some friends who are Milton architects reviewed this today, and one of them made a suggestion that I don't think we've talked about before. I thought it was interesting. It'll add to your site constraints, but it's worth considering, which is in front of Esprit de Vent and the other 2 businesses on this area, there's quite a nice little open plaza.
Right.
And one of the things these 2 suggested was in front of your sort of tower entrance, is it possible, and again, depending on the constraints of the site, it may or may not be, is it possible to have an equal sense of open space there so that the 2 open space areas are very similar, create a continuity of open space across the intersection? And again, you may find as you look that it may not be possible, but I think it'd be worth checking that out, because that's especially, and I know you've talked in the past about possibly having a restaurant there. That was one of the considerations, is a nice spill-out area for people to come in and out. The other issues with your courtyard, and obviously you've got great issues there, is you want to make sure if, for example, there's a restaurant patio there, that people are comfortable sitting that close to the sidewalk and traffic and ensuring that there's enough
Right.
distance there. So just want to make sure that you consider those items. So anything else from the board? Because if not, I'd like to open it up to public comment. Okay. Eddie?
No.
Okay. All right, in that case, it's still a public hearing, so let's open it up to some public comment. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate these.
Could one of them come up here, because I have some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're ready to answer questions, okay.
Excuse me. Margaret Donovan, 41 Central Avenue, in Abutter. I like this.
What?
Excellent.
Like?
Speak up to the cameras, Margaret.
We want you to love it.
Well, I'm not there yet. I have some questions.
Yeah.
Now, you referred to the mansard windows, and I think you told me, but I think publicly you should explain also. To me, these look like make-believe mansard windows. Are they going to
They're-
be jutting out,
Yes, they're dormers,
the dormers?
and they would obviously be flush at the bottom of them and then jutting out at the top. The angle of the mansard roof we would be trying to do is a very traditional one, and that the exact angle hasn't been determined yet, so the configuration of the dormer, but probably graphically, the center triple dormer is probably, shows it better than some of these, because I know, like this one and this look minuscule, they look flat, and that's probably the drawing's fault. But they would be the same profile as say Central Ave, 36 Central.
Bill has it up on the screen there for
Yeah.
people that,
Yeah.
and he has a little pointer so that
Yeah.
the
Now
people
what-
at home can, yes, there we go.
That would be the dormer pieces that we're talking about.
Right. And where you see the sidewall of it is
Right.
I think what you're saying, that it really shows that the mansard is angled and not flat.
Are those
Not
fish
vertic- not
scales
vertical.
up there on the inside?
No,
This
They-
scallop
they could be, but
slate tiles.
Yeah, slate.
we hadn't thought of them as fish scales.
I love fish, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do with decorative banding, which they do in slate a lot. But we thought of it as a square or rectangular,
I like squares too.
blue-gray color, probably.
What happened to the clock tower?
It shrunk.
Too tall.
The building is.
Was too tall.
Was
Yeah,
too tall,
yeah.
right. All right.
And we felt like we wanted to kind of bring the scale down at the corner, too, to kind of make that feel like it's wrapping around more continuously than the tower did.
Now, why are you having brick on the first floor and the hardy plank above? Why not? Why is it not being consistent all the way down?
Well, because there's as you know, long tradition of, for a few reasons, of brick or masonry, stone, other masonry materials at the ground floor. And one of the reasons is it's often a basement, and it's partially buried, partially exposed. Historically, that's the reason. And also it's more durable. You know, ground floor levels tend to get hit and whacked, so we want something stronger than clapboard. And the look, I think it's a better look to create different materials as you go up the building. That's traditional.
It's consistent
Well,
with the
that's
other
not
commercial
something I would
buildings.
agree with, because that was the issue at 36 Central Avenue, and that's why we wanted to see the brick come down to the first floor, so that it would be consistent, so.
To come down to the grade, you mean, when you say the first floor?
Well, yeah, over at 36 Central,
Right.
they brought the brick, which was on the second and third floor, down to the first floor. The top was the mansard roof anyway, so you didn't particularly
Yeah.
notice any difference in style or materials. But it did make it look much more, with the brick on the first floor, it did make it look much more uniform, much more attractive. So I think I would not particularly like different materials going up. I think it should be,
You think it should be all brick, is what you think?
well, you're right, Mr. Weiss.
Okay.
Well, on Central Avenue, you do have the brick hardy plank combination on the sides of the building, because again, Central Avenue used the brick for the front facade and the commercial areas, and then changed it to hardy plank on the residential side. I believe at one point you were talking about doing that, is keeping the brick to indicate the commercial areas and the hardy plank on the residential. But as we get more detailed drawings, we can discuss that aesthetic choice further.
Now, this main piece in the center is what you would see coming down Elliott Street?
Right, it's
Which is
it's
Elliott
right
Street.
right at the corner. So here's Elliott Street.
Right.
That's the building.
So-
Yeah, so,
yeah.
but this is what you'd see, coming down
Yeah.
Elliott Street.
Well, you wouldn't see that angle, but you'd see it from this angle. In other words,
This is going to be sticking out, though, is it not?
yeah, as you're coming down, down this direction, I think you're saying,
Right.
Elliott Street.
And you're looking at the building,
And you're looking at the building, you see this corner piece,
which is this.
tower, if we called it a tower. Yeah, and then as you
Warren,
get,
you might want to show, sorry to interrupt, you might want to show on that picture.
yeah,
so
as
the
you get,
camera's on.
this is taken, as you can see, pretty much from, equivalently from the corner, Elliott Street and Central Ave. So we tried to, with this shot, get as many elements in it as possible.
The street of Van is right here, Margaret,
Right,
this corner.
right over here.
Okay. And my final question is, are these real balconies? Can you go out?
Yeah.
And then can you put chairs and?
Yeah.
How wide? would
4
they-
feet.
4 feet?
4 feet deep, yeah,
Okay.
and 14 wide.
But they won't have that beautiful view of that house across the street that 36 Central has.
No, they won't.
Can't have everything.
I think it's a good first step.
Great, thank
Good,
you.
thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak as part of the public hearing? Any other comments? Yes, come forward. introduce yourself for the cameras.
Jim McCabe, 136 Elliott. Now, is the balcony's going to be on Elliott Street?
There will be ones, yeah, although they're set back,
Because I'm directly across.
right, they're set back about 60 feet from
Need some,
from the street. You can see that,
This your house, Jim, right here?
Yeah,
yeah.
yep.
So you can see that 60-foot setback plus the
So-
sidewalk, and then they're
So what's the how far is the setback? How-
60 feet.
Oh, 60 feet, that's
Right.
pretty
Then you
good.
got the street.
And
Right,
then,
I'll get the
and then the
street,
street, you know, 4-foot sidewalk there.
So
something like
that's a
that.
good setback on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And,
And there's landscaping,
right,
trees and lawn. So there'll be some screening
Okay.
also on the street, near the street.
and traffic too, I'm concerned about that
Yes.
in the back on that side, what Pete said. But
Was
it's-
it you who's concerned about your driveway lining
Well,
up
when
with
you're coming out, if it's
Okay.
gonna hit,
Mhm.
the lights coming
Right.
from that, if they're going left
Right.
or whatever, right too.
You can see your house, there's a bigger thing, Jim. See
Yeah.
the, can you, what's that big tree beside, there's a big bush beside your house there. See the big greenery?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Now, where's your house?
My house is right directly 136. I'm the first house, there's a driveway, and then my house is right there.
This one.
Yes, that's
Right.
it.
Oh, that's your house?
That's it
Right.
right there.
Yeah,
So the headlights won't be coming
Well-
out, shining on you?
well,
At least the end?
I don't know how far back it is on that.
Well, you can see it, there it is. See
they're
the
gonna make-
driveway? Show them the driveway, Bill. In the,
Your driveway right
No,
here.
the
no,
other driveway.
for
Their
the
dri-
complex, the
131.
complex driveway,
The other side of the street.
other side of the street.
One belongs to the hairdresser in the front.
No, the development.
No, the
development's
131
I'm gonna be-
Elliott
but I'm up
Hendry's
further, though.
driveway,
Oh,
the
this
new
is up
driveway.
Yeah, right there.
Right
There's
there.
the-
Right
See,
there.
there's your driveway, okay, there's the
Right.
driveway across the street. Now, cars coming out, it's not.
They're gonna make the turn,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Well, when they make the turn, they'll hit, but it's.
Yeah, they'll hit some of my, the way I think it's gonna happen.
We can look at landscape screening too, that would break up the headlights and prevent
Right.
that, so.
And 138 too is
Yeah.
a little closer to that.
I
that
think the
turn.
landscape screening, I think it's important, so I'm glad
Right.
you bring it up. But I think we might be able to address that with landscape screening and just ensuring that the driveway doesn't line up directly with either of your driveways.
Great,
So,
thank you.
thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Any more? All right, seeing none, our next meeting is August 25th. Would you be ready by then with further sketches and drawings? Okay, so we'll want the refinements we talked about today. We'll want the massing sketches we talked about today.
Right.
We had also talked about, it might be a little early for that, but don't forget that we're going to want that table of zoning requirements and how you're meeting those. So if you're ready for August, that's great. If it's not, and let's move you to,
And
if somebody,
they're going to do a few elevations for the trackside.
yeah, we would
Oh,
like
yeah,
to see
we'll-
at some point elevations of all four sides.
Sure.
So,
I could talk to
We'll,
conception.
we'll have that next time.
Just sort of like this.
Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe the
exactly,
same-
Yeah.
sketches.
We
We're
just,
not talking full
Concept
construction drawings yet.
instead of, because of the history here on this project, I think we felt that it was better to just kind of show an idea without elaborating too much at this
Right.
point. See if that makes sense and move ahead
And- Oh,
accordingly.
and the site diagram to show the restraints.
The analysis, yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
excellent.
Just a question for Warren. The units on this side,
Yeah.
will they be able to see the river?
Probably
Probably
the
certainly in the
upper,
fall.
upper ones will,
Yeah.
upper stories, but,
A water view?
yeah. I mean, you're looking down, the bank is, it depends on the angle of the bank and everything. The water is quite a bit below, say, the bridge level. So probably not, they wouldn't see a lot of water at, say, first floor level, but I think a lot above there as you go up, yeah.
And I hope you're keeping an eye on 36 Central and their market sales, because that will, obviously they're up against you in competition.
Yeah.
It's nothing like adding a lot of housing
Yeah.
units at the same time, so.
How are they doing? I heard they're selling pretty well.
They were selling pretty well last time I
Yeah.
checked, so worth considering. Okay, so 6:50 on
Okay.
August, what is it, 25th?
25th.
August 25th.
Okay,
Great, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks for coming in.
sure.
Okay, next on our agenda, old business 683 to 685 Brush Hill Road. We are
Sounds
supposedly looking at the final documents and signing. Come on up. Introduce yourself for the cameras.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Anthony Rosito, developer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a little concerned because at our last meeting, we weren't able to sign anything because we all had questions on the documents, and you hadn't received them, and not all of us had received them, and all of that. And so the idea was, as I remember stating, is that you would get the documents, you'd get them to us for our review, we'd get them back to you, and then we would get a final set for this meeting. Now, I got your revisions. I didn't see anything from you until, what's today, Thursday, till Tuesday? Yesterday. And then Alex had questions, well, maybe not from you personally, but from your lawyer. Alex had questions on them this morning. Correct, Alex?
Well, I sent an email this morning.
I saw the email this morning. So I'm a little concerned that we didn't get the first round to review in time for you to get back our comments, or your lawyer to get back our comments, so that we could have a final copy to sign today.
I don't know when my attorney got this. I believe it was Friday, though, last Friday, that my attorney got over the first round of comments. So it was last Friday
Okay.
that my comments came back. Then I actually came in, we sat down, and we had a couple other things to kind of go through. And then I got some revisions this morning,
Okay,
last night and this morning.
okay,
So it did cause a problem. However, we did take care of, we're working off the same document now with red lines, so we're very, very close. But
okay.
again, the last round of revisions came through this morning, so even if I got the revisions done today, they were pointless because nobody would have saw them anyways.
All right,
So-
so.
But we're
The only two
extremely
changes-
close.
The only
Okay.
two changes
Yeah.
that were made since I talked to you were the same pieces that I was supposed to take out number 3 on page 8.
Page 8 of which one? We've got two documents.
Oh,
Right there.
the
Yeah, which one for the
Declaration of
rest of
Trust,
Sorry.
Thank
the,
you.
Declaration.
Yeah,
page 8, paragraph 3.
You see it,
Yeah.
you see it flew out. That was the one you and Alex came up with, delete that,
Yeah, that's fine.
and I did that one.
okay,
The only other change that I made in any of this goes back to page 5 of the decision. And that one, you had me write in, after it says subdivision control law, put in "or this decision."
okay.
Well, he didn't, I did.
You did, I know.
He's pointing at you,
I'm
Alex.
pointing at both of you.
Oh. I thought
Yeah,
you were you.
you. There.
Maybe specify by name, Bill.
Okay,
Who's
Alex told me
responsible
to
for
write
it?
"or this decision," and I
Okay.
I wrote
did.
it twice.
Yes.
All right,
And Anthony agreed to that. Anthony agreed to taking out on page, in the covenant,
Page 11, right?
page 8, to remove number 3. And I did. And that's what everybody has in front of them.
okay.
There's no
Which is
other
what we
changes.
Is this
received
what you
last
did?
night.
Is this the right, is this
Yes.
the right copy?
Yes,
Okay,
All right,
that got taken out.
I
So,
understand, but this is the latest red line.
this
With
is the
this
one we
ad.
received in our packets last night, correct? We have received nothing new since our packets last
This is
night.
the latest one, isn't it?
Where's your packet? Did you break your
You should
envelope?
It should say version 72711, right down here. Version, everybody got that?
Yeah.
What does it say?
Bottom left, it
Seven.
says 683,
You're in the first one.
685
You're in
Brush Hill
your
Road,
working document.
version 72711.
727, this is
Y'all-
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
727.
Okay, all
All
right,
right.
got it.
So are we all happy with these? We got these in our packets, everybody happy with them? Alex, are you happy with them?
I am not happy with them.
Okay,
I
so-
wrote an email, which, shall I read it? Just to indicate the depth of my unhappiness?
Did you send the email out,
Let's hear
Alex?
I did. I sent it
What
to
time?
Anthony, I sent it to Emily, and I sent it to Bill, but I couldn't send it to the whole board because I didn't want to
Open meeting?
Yeah,
have an open meeting issue.
fair enough.
So what I said in this email was, this so-called final decision is unacceptable to me. To begin with, I believe that it's legally unsound to try to subject Lot 4 to the homeowner's trust without an easement from its owner filed with the land court. The homeowner's trust should simply spell out what the owner of Lot 4 needs to do in order to install a driveway to Beechwood Lane and to use the lane's utility structure and sewer. If the owner of Lot 4 accepts the terms, then a legally binding contract will be executed by the initial trustee, who is the developer, and the owner of Lot 4. That contract may be fileable with the land court as a restriction. In any event, the homeowners association trust should be restored to what I propose, except for specification of the terms of the offer to be made to the owner of Lot 4. And what I proposed was that the owner of Lot 4, Dr. Andriani, pay a 12th of the expenses, roadway expenses, and Anthony suggests that it's a 12th of the trust expenses. And that was fine, except the trust was then expanded to include the trustees interfering in matters of toys on lawns and motor vehicles, scooters, all kinds of stuff that the trustees are going to be dealing with. And it doesn't seem to me that Dr. Andriani should pay anything with respect to that sort of stuff. I go on. I think it's unduly formal and unnecessary to provide that a trustee cannot resign without filing in the land court. This says the trustee has to go to the land court and file a resignation in order to resign. It seems to me that a trustee, if he wants to resign, he or she wants to resign, should notify the 5 lot owners, and that should be adequate. To say that you have to go to the land court they're not going to understand this. They're not going to have to do it. They're going to have to hire a lawyer and spend more dough to do that. And
how does the public, Alex, know who the trustees are? And if one resigns...
why does
the public have to know?
Well, you have a trust. Or the attorney.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I suppose that I suppose that there should be a provision that you can write to the trust and get a statement as to who the trustees are. I don't think you should have to go to the land court to find out who the trustees of the trust are. And to say that everything has to be recorded in the land court on this sort of dinky little driveway.
Who keeps
Double
the
Alex,
record, Alex?
what's standard?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that it's not standard to have to file resignation.
Pretty
for
much
land
none
court.
of this is standard.
Yeah, so we can.
Okay. I go on. I have all sorts of problems with it. I would like to make it as the trust as user-friendly as possible.
User-friendly
In
is
any
good.
event. Filing with the land court, if it has to be, it's not user-friendly, and it's clearly not going to happen. And there's going to be all kinds of problems with the requirement. But I have problems with the restrictions. And if you want to look at the restrictions, go to page 8.
Of the Declaration of Trust, yes, we're still.
Number 1 talks about
Non-residential.
non-residential. I say
That's
that's
fine.
fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
that's fine. Yeah.
Number 2, they say no tree or shrub clearing or earth regrading in the no disturb buffer zones without the express approval of the trustees and the Town of Milton Planning Board, but it doesn't talk about other work that goes on. Clearing and
Herbicides and...
well, you know, I mean, tree or shrub clearing or earth regrading, there are all kinds of other things you can do, like pruning. And it seems to me that maintenance work in the no disturb buffer should,
Well, now here's a question. How material do we want that maintenance work to be? I mean, if somebody wants to prune a twig, are we going to require them to come in front of us? Or is it
it can
major pruning? How do we want to do
it can be as
this?
specific as you like, but it needs to be more specific than this, because this simply says shrubbery clearing, which means removing the shrubs
Right.
or the trees, or regrading.
Right. And you're right, it does not
doesn't
prohibit
talk about spraying
heavy duty.
herbicides and getting rid of everything.
Fires.
I think that it needs to add maintenance work in the buffer area is needing approval. Number 3, only one single-family dwelling together with the usual and customary accessory buildings, garages, and/or barn may be constructed on any lot. As we know, there are all kinds of other structures that require, that are considered buildings under the zoning bylaw. And this language would prohibit someone building a swimming pool because it's not permitted. I mean, the zoning controls what you can build on your lot. It's just so unnecessary to go through this, to say what you can build on the lot. The zoning already provides what you can build on the lot. Number 4, they say the sign can be 20 square feet, and I say a 4x5 sign at each driveway is absolutely inappropriate and far too large.
I think there was miscommunication on that. I was thinking more of along the lines of a sight sign while we're constructing the homes. I wasn't really thinking of like somebody putting a 20-foot sign saying, "This is my house," you know? I was thinking more of a sight sign, which brings up a bunch of more issues as far as amending this. Like, I can't amend this at all without coming here. And a lot of things were during construction that I wanted to amend later before I hand it over, like the sign being one of them.
What this says is that the trustee has the power to waive any of this stuff. And the trustee is, of course, the developer initially. So the trustee, if he doesn't like one lot owner, can be a real hard on that guy, like Dr. Andriani, who is supposedly going to be subjected to this trust, and the trustees' tender administrations. And the other lot owners can get their waivers and do all kinds of stuff. I say, let's get serious, and if you really think something is important, write it down and make it non-waivable. If it's waivable, then you've got a problem, because it means that you're going to have enforcement which is dependent on whether or not you like the person who asks.
You start getting into subjectivity, and that gets you into lawsuits.
Right, no, I
You don't
know, I
want
just
that.
need
Yeah.
a little bit more clear direction, like as far as, we want more restrictions on going into the buffer zone, but you want less restrictions on what people can do on their yard. So I kind of want to go down one road. And as far as, as far as Lot 4 is concerned, I'm even thinking of making him abide by the buffer rules. If all of these houses are protecting neighbors, why shouldn't Dr. Adriani protect his neighbor from the
He
buffer?
can't.
All the
He's-
same
he's
rules.
not
Brought his
part
under
of your-
different rules.
Yeah.
What,
Well, I
what
think-
he,
part of
what
your
he wants to
subdivision.
do
But
is
it is
make
gonna be part
Dr.
of the subdivision.
Andriani, this document makes Dr. Andriani subject to the trust and all
Right.
these rules.
No, the only thing with Dr. Andriani's property is that whether or not you allow him access for the road.
Okay.
His property is completely separate from your
So he
subdivision.
wouldn't be
and
under these,
the only thing he is under is access to the road and snow clearing and maintenance of the road.
okay.
That's
but
it.
That brings another problem though,
Right.
because now you're giving him, well, not you're giving him, we're giving him access through the subdivision, which in essence, he becomes part of the subdivision.
No.
So, well, it appears, if somebody were to drive by, you would say that guy's part of the subdivision, unless you watch the meetings.
Okay, I see your point on
And
that.
then if he's got-
Yes.
You know, and these rules are to protect the values of the property and to protect the neighbors. So everyone else abides by the rules, and he's got a RV, a 100-foot RV in his front lawn. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? I mean, it kind of devalues everything, so I might as well not have any
Under the
covenants.
zoning, you can't have an RV on the
That was just
on the
an
lawn.
example,
Have you
though.
read
Right.
the zoning? You know what the provisions
That's just an
of
example.
these
Hold
are?
on here. Can I make a suggestion? You clearly have some issues. as with this. Okay, not all.
No, most of them are all right.
I've got issues with this, and I've got other issues.
You have questions on this. You clearly have some outstanding questions on this.
Yeah.
Can I ask for your forbearance in granting us another extension to the day after our next planning board
Absolutely, and
meeting?
Mr. Whiteside's points are actually, most of them are very good. I mean, it's
Okay.
just, a couple of them, I'm a little confused on how it would work and if it still protects the subdivision's value, that's all.
Okay, and those are perfectly reasonable questions to have. I think the issues you're bringing up are perfectly reasonable. If you have time, I suggest that you, Bill, you and your lawyer all meet together,
Sure,
hammer this
absolutely.
out, give it to the rest of the board, and you have a month. I mean, because we're skipping our August 11th meeting. You have a month to get it to us, get our comments, so that on our next meeting, well, 3 to 4 weeks, yeah. Our next meeting, we have in front of us, yes, a red line document for review, but I want the physical document that we are going to sign with no changes.
A week prior.
So a week prior would be perfect.
Be great,
So
yeah.
nobody's allowed to make any changes once we get that final document.
Financial implications.
Sorry?
A month may have financial
We
implications.
can have our August 11th meeting just for them if we want. That's fine by me. So I don't want to do too many financial implications. Bernie?
I don't recall us going through this effort with the lower states or with any subdivision that I've ever dealt with. Why all of a sudden are we doing this?
That's a very interesting question.
With
And I was
protected
not
vistas,
here for the lowest states,
or
so I
with
can't
protected
answer.
setbacks?
Okay.
But now
What did we do for the lowest
we're
states?
sticking our nose in everything. I mean,
Look,
Harry, come on.
All right.
Making it difficult.
one thing I would like to say.
Would you want to buy a house?
One thing I would like to say is I would never buy a house in a million years with these restrictions on it, saying that you can't have a clothesline, you can't have toys on
Right.
the lawn, you can't have gardening tools on the lawn, you can't have motor vehicles, can't have a scooter. Who knows what
Well,
you
who
can have.
promulgated these?
All this red stuff I eliminated from
Is this your attorney?
my draft,
Part of
and
it, yeah,
then,
this- part of the
and
red
then
stuff was.
magically, every bit of it was just stuck back into the thing. So I took it out again, and then poof, it's bad.
I would be,
And-
yes, okay.
Well, wait, let me, I'm
ahead,
answering
I'm
Bernie's
waiting.
question.
I'll take a drink while I'm waiting.
Take two.
The problem we have with all these restrictions, I have no problem. If you think this is the way to run a subdivision, you're entitled to do it. However, this document is going to be appended to our decision saying the planning board requires you to
Right.
do this. And if in the future someone wants to hang out some laundry,
Which is
dry-
not prohibited in the
dry-
town of Milton.
To dry a
Yes.
towel, to
Yeah.
dry a whatever, and the trustees come up and say you're in flagrant violation of the homeowners covenant, and they say, and the planning board required us to have these provisions. So unless the planning board is comfortable, and initially I had a provision saying that the developer can run amok and create all sorts of restrictions if you want to,
Right.
but don't do it in this document. Do it somewhere else.
I think putting in a provision that allows the trustees to set their own bylaws, their own rules, that would be reasonable. I agree that putting items that are much more restrictive than standard town zoning would be problematic. I also think restating things that are in this document that are a general part of the town bylaws, for example, just to use the RV
Right.
provision again, I mean, that's already stated. You don't need to restate stuff that's already in our zoning.
So I could take all of this out and with a different, separate document,
Right,
Yeah.
still hold them accountable to that.
right,
But I just can't hold Lot 4 accountable to that.
right.
Right, exactly, because he is not a member of your subdivision. He would be bound by any of the same general zoning guidelines that
He's
anybody
like-
else is.
The front piece of the subdivision.
But he's
like
not.
the entrance stone.
He's
of the
like the
subdivision.
next property over to your subdivision.
We can provide that he has to landscape appropriately, but
Well,
landscaping to your
I'm not
approval
sure we
is.
can do that.
No, I don't
yeah.
think you can
No, we
impose
can
that.
simply say that that could be a part of their contract. In other words, when you say to Dr. Andriani, you can tie into Beechwood Lane, these are the terms, part of it could be that you've got to maintain, mow the grass where, in the part of the
Yes,
part
along
of
the
right
part
of
that
way in
actually
front of-
borders
in
his
front
road.
of, his thing.
So that's
And
why
if,
it's separate
and
agreement as
if
well.
you have a landscape idea that you think he should pursue, you could bring it up, but just.
Well, it
just-
depends whether that's part of the lot or part of the common area.
Well,
If it's part of the common
as
area,
part of the
then
ro- As part of the road.
part of the roadway
As
maintenance.
part of the road.
Right.
So the road's not actually touching his land.
But the
Road does not touch his land, so you cannot govern his land. It would
The
just
road
be.
does touch his
No,
land.
it doesn't. There's a buffer zone.
Well, actually.
No,
all
the
there is
road does
is the
touch his
fee.
land.
Well, he has to have
There's the
frontage.
Right.
He
Oh,
does
yeah,
have
yeah, sorry,
frontage.
sorry,
That's
sorry. I'm looking at the wrong part.
Marshall
of the
Road.
road. Okay.
Okay.
So you could probably govern this stretch right along here. But you can't touch the rest of that. It's just like this lot over here. You have no control over that lot.
Depending what he agrees to do.
Right,
that's
because
the
that's a
Chapman lot.
separate agreement. Is that what-
Dr. Andriani can agree to reasonable
Right.
items, but, we got to know what the reasonable items that he's
What
going
I'm
to
saying is
be.
you can't impose anything on
Right,
this
but
lot.
this will be
he
another
doesn't
separate
have-
agreement with Dr. Adriani. That I
Exactly.
could say certain things and he doesn't have to agree to them, right? Is that
That's
what?
precisely
Well,
true.
In
Whatever.
the homeowner's trust,
think
it's
I
going to
understand.
say that this is the deal you're going to offer the doctor. And then if the doctor accepts the deal, you're going to write a contract with the doctor, and you can put it in the form of a restriction that you can record the land court. But this is simply something that's going to go on between your lawyer and Dr. Andriani. You can't, I mean,
Right.
this.
You can't govern
This
his property
attempts
in that
to
document.
somehow make him subject to the trust, and it really,
I know what you're saying now. I got it.
legally
exactly
speaking,
what
Yeah,
you're
it.
what you do in your contract
That's not-
is
you don't
another
care.
matter. This just is the governing document for the trust itself.
I totally get it.
Okay?
Yep, right.
Happy to discuss this with you in detail. As you recall, at the last meeting, you had to rush off to the ZBA in Boston.
Yeah.
So we will meet again.
We could set something now if you, I mean.
We're not going to meet now, are we?
No, we could set
We're
something
going-
up
Set something, he
for.
said set
We're
something
going to
up,
set it up
yes.
tomorrow morning with Bill, after he looks at his busy schedule.
So my next question is there a problem in waiting till August 25th? Do you need to meet earlier than that?
There is,
Okay.
the actual date, which I'm sure we can work with, is August 1. I'm sure I can work with till the 11th. The 28th might be a big issue.
Let's do the 11th.
11th is fine. How
If
about we put you
possible.
on at 6:40 on the 11th?
6:30.
6:30, you'll be our only item of business, how's that?
Alex, why don't you review the lower state, what we decided to do to the rear of those houses so they wouldn't moon Brush Hill Road and so forth? That seems to me you wrote that.
I'll look at I mean, there are.
It's very
This,
effective.
as you remember, this is a little different from the low estates, and there's a number of things that.
It's a private way.
We
Low-
want to understand that.
low-
And the abutters of this particular development did specifically request those no disturb zones, and that's all been agreed to. So I know you brought that up as a
No.
particular item.
One item which is taken out here, which you're going to have to consider what you think, is that the right-of-way over the two lots going to Brush Hill Lane, initially I put in this has to be extinguished. But you pushed back and said that you think it will be extinguished, but not necessarily through our decision. And thinking about it, since this extinguishment of the right-of-way is to the direct benefit of two landowners, rather than serving any public purpose, it seems to me that without your consent, it would be inappropriate for us to require extinguishment of the easement, even though we think it's a good idea and will save you a lot of grief in the future. In any event, that was my reasoning on the right-of-way, that there was no real public purpose that we could come up with to justify saying extinguish it. So if you push back, I think that it can't be in there.
Bernie,
Just
did
one
you
other-
have a?
Yeah, by us dictating that he eliminates the right-of-way, do we know everyone that has an interest in that right-of-way?
He can only extinguish what he has.
Or what if there's another document out
Well,
there
then that's fine. Whoever has rights under the other document,
Still have-
his
continue to have
extinguishment
them.
isn't going to extinguish anyone else's rights.
It only
If-
extinguishes
if-
the ones he
If there are
owns.
if you have an interest and I have an interest, I can extinguish my interest and your interest will remain. That's the law,
Excuse me?
the majesty of the law.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Charles de Vegva. I live at 50 Brush Hill Lane. I gave up my wedding anniversary to come to this meeting.
Oh, my goodness.
The
Well, yes, happy
Happy
anniversary.
Uh,
I hope you're going for a good dinner and
This,
flowers afterwards.
this does not only affect myself and my neighbor, it affects the traffic onto Brush Hill Lane. So it is not only a matter for the two of us, it also affects all the residents of Brush Hill Lane, where traffic can damage the road, which the residents of Brush Hill Lane at their own expense pave and what have you. Furthermore, this gentleman gave me his word a long time ago that he would extinguish this, and I supported his development, if you will recall. And I think it is wrong at this point, after you had given your word, that this should be changed. But what I wanted to bring to your attention is that it's not only the Dohertys and us, but all the residents of Brush Hill Lane who are affected by this.
Thank you very much. So there is a public benefit.
Okay?
Yes.
What does the board want to do?
Just to clarify, I didn't say I wouldn't extinguish it. I didn't go back on my word yet, so I mean, this is,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about something.
Careful with that
Well,
yet.
no, my point is that you can't go back on your word if you didn't do anything yet, so.
Right,
just
okay.
That's all I'm saying.
I do remember at the very beginning of
Yeah.
the hearing that you
That's
said that
something
you'd
that we did
extinguish
discuss,
it. It had
absolutely.
been requested, so I believe that that should be a provision, since he did, it was at the very beginning of the hearings that this would happen.
Brought up
That
several
would be my
times.
opinion, yes? Any other comments on that?
So you're thinking you might have an objection to extinguishing it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's something we'll work out. I just didn't think it was, the board's decision to extinguish it. I figured we would work it out later. I didn't go against my word. I didn't
Yeah.
not do it yet. I don't even own it yet. Construction didn't start yet. Nothing happened, hasn't been used, so.
It's not so much our decision to distinguish it as our writing in promises already made, if you see what I mean. We're not telling you to extinguish it, but you have already offered up the option to extinguish it, and it would make sense to write that into the documents.
If that's what you
So
guys.
if you're,
What we can do
Fine.
when we meet is we will discuss appropriate language.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable. And the correct vehicle between these two documents in which to extinguish it.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you very
Okay,
much.
thank
Go
you.
enjoy your wedding anniversary.
Right. All right.
Is there anything else?
Let's, as I understand it, you are agreeing
Yes.
that our decision can be rendered to and including August 12th.
Yes.
Excellent. And we will look forward to, let me just reiterate, that what we want to do is have you guys work out a document,
Right.
send us a copy of the document for our review. We'll send back any changes within a day, because we've only got 2 weeks to work with, 2 days? 2 days to give for work schedules. And then prior to the meeting, the Tuesday evening prior to the meeting, we will, the absolute latest, earlier is preferable, we will receive in our hands a physical document that will be the document that we sign
That we're being asked to
on
sign.
Thursday. So no changes after that Tuesday night.
August 9th.
Okay?
Great.
Everybody happy with that?
It comes to our facilitator, Bill
Yes.
Clark, so that Alex will not be in violation of the open meeting law.
Yes, yeah, the bill will send it out. But my point, so everybody's got those deadlines down, right?
Monday, 10 o'clock.
This Monday?
Yeah, you
10 o'clock?
All
Sure.
right. Good. Excellent. And we will see you at 6:30 on August 11th.
And thanks for coming in.
Yes, thank you so much. All righty. 17 Canton, oh, just sign? Okay, fine. We only have 2 copies. Yes.
Yeah, let's,
All right.
You were going to file
Last
this
item
with
on the agenda is a presentation from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
What about this?
We're signing it as we go.
We're going to get there.
Oh, okay.
Means-
May I ask a
Yes,
question?
of course.
We weren't able to attend the 14th meeting and.
These are mics.
The what, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry?
These are both mics.
Yes, that was continued to August 25th at 6:40. They weren't ready. So were we, but they weren't ready for the meeting, so it's been continued. August 25th,
oh no, you sat here for 2 hours.
6.
But you probably enjoyed sitting around watching the planning board.
I'm sorry, I announced it at one point, but you may not have been in here when.
We were out of town, and then our neighbor was here,
Ah,
and he passed the word to us.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
The 26th at 6:30.
25th at 6:30,
25th.
yeah. It'll be the first, other than our minutes and things, it'll be the first item on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, now welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all for giving me the time to speak with you this evening. Trust everyone has a copy of a memo and FAQ sheet that I sent to Bill for distribution.
Yes.
Excellent.
And thank you.
Yep. So my name is James Freese. I'm a regional planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. I am working on the update to the Town of Milton's 2005 Hazard Mitigation Plan. I'm working actually at this time with 10 different South Shore communities on these hazard mitigation plans, and happy to be here in Milton working on this one. Do you have a clicker for that, or should I just?
You're going to point at me and I'm going to hit.
That'll work.
Yeah.
There we go.
Michael, can you flip this on now?
With one on.
Getting the technical
Oh,
thing.
okay.
Ah, there we
Thank
go.
you.
All
You're
right.
clear to go.
Oh, there you go.
Excellent. So again, tonight we're here to talk about a natural hazard mitigation plan. This is basically these are strategic actions taken to reduce or prevent the loss of life and property from natural hazard events. So again, we're focusing on natural hazards, not man-made hazards, hurricanes, earthquakes, and those types of things. And then this is specifically not a emergency response plan. So we're looking at long-range strategies to reduce the town's vulnerability. We're not looking at the actions the town takes during or immediately following a hazard event. And one of the primary reasons we do these plans is the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, passed by Congress. Basically, it was meant to encourage pre-disaster mitigation planning across the country, and in order to essentially add a carrot to that formula, they towns or cities and towns that wish to be eligible for FEMA hazard mitigation grant funds must have one of these plans that has been approved by FEMA and is updated on a 5-year rotating basis, which is why we're here. Why we're here today. I'm going to run through these items really quickly, but basically hazard mitigation actions include a whole range of tools and techniques, and these will be available for you for future reference, but just broadly, we're looking at actions that are intended to prevent damages, such as planning and zoning and floodplain regulations, which I know the town already has a lot of. Actions taken to protect property, which includes things like relocating or acquiring properties that are in hazard areas, primarily flooding is the one we look at in that case. Bill, just keep flipping through these. I'm a couple ahead of you at this point. Next one, great, that's great, thank you. And also, especially in coastal areas, we elevate properties so that they're elevated out of the floodplain, so there's a couple of different ways to get properties out of the floodplain. Public education and awareness is also very important for hazard mitigation efforts, and I know the town has on file, or I'm sure you do, FEMA floodplains for residents who want to come and find out whether their home is already in a floodplain or those types of things. Natural resource protection, again, another place where I believe Milton has been very active in terms of wetlands conservation, having a wetlands bylaw, and those types of things. Another important technique is, of course, structural projects. These things include, well, in the coastal areas, seawalls, but also things like bridges, elevating bridges to bring utility lines up out of harm's way and those types of things. And then the last kind of tool or technique used in hazard mitigation is emergency services protection. These are actions taken to ensure that during a hazard event, your emergency services can actually go out and help people. So it might include things like relocating a fire station out of a hazard area, or otherwise elevating it, or reconditioning it, or something like that, or providing emergency power generators in a emergency shelter. So then I'd like to spend a little more time talking about the process that we're going to go through to develop the update to the hazard mitigation plan. And we generally use this 6-step process. And I'll highlight for you that public input is very important to this process. I'll come back to this, but we're very interested in hearing from the public about a number of things. One very important purpose for public outreach is to make the public aware of hazard mitigation as something that the town is engaged in and build support for those types of actions the town might take in the future. To mitigate against natural hazard events. But then also we're looking for public input in terms of where flooding occurs, or where they know there are hazards, or some ideas that might exist out there where people, ideas for steps the town could take to help mitigate against, again, flooding or other natural hazard events. So I'll get into these steps in a little more detail, but in the next slide I just want to also touch on the fact that we work very closely with a cross-section of town staff on these plans. It includes Bill in the planning department, as well as representatives of fire, emergency management, DPW, and police, and potentially others as the plan progresses. So the very first step, of course, is to map where hazards occur within the town. We rely on national data from FEMA, things like floodplains and things like that, state data that tells us where, for example, hurricanes or tornadoes have occurred, or earthquakes for that matter. The closest earthquake epicenter to us was actually at the Quincy-Braintree border, and it registered a 2.2 on the Richter scale, which is essentially barely perceptible to most people. Slide. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back to that slide. And the last place we come to, but the most important place we come to for information about hazards is local knowledge. And we primarily get that information from staff who help us identify where it actually floods, where you've actually experienced flooding in the past. Things like the fire department helps us determine where there's the potential for brush fire incidents and those types of things. So then what are the risks exactly? Where are the critical facilities is really the major question here. Things like the town hall building itself, emergency service buildings, hospitals, concentrations of vulnerable populations like daycare centers, hospitals, senior facilities. We identify where all of these are, and we look at them in relation to where the hazards occur. And then if we go to the next slide, we produce a map that looks like this. And this is a map that actually was done working with town staff. The highlighted, or the blue encircled areas were areas that were identified where there's there has been the experience of flooding. The red is referring to brush fires. And then in the orange areas, those are areas we've identified where the town anticipates the potential for development or redevelopment activity within a roughly 10-year time frame, which we identify so that we can also overlay that against known hazards, so you guys can be aware of that as you're reviewing those projects in the future. I have a full copy of this plan with me that we can look at once I'm done with the presentation if you would like. Also on here, just for your reference, is the green dots. Those are the critical infrastructure sites that I was talking about that were identified working with the town, and also we have red dots representing the general area where repetitive loss properties have occurred. Repetitive loss properties are identified through the National Flood Insurance Program as properties that have made claims against their flood insurance more than twice within the last 10 years, roughly.
I see we have one red dot.
There is in fact one red dot right there, and there's 4 of them.
That's a Canton Ave?
There are 2.
Yeah, there's 2 on this map, and when I pull out the larger map, you'll see there's 4 of them total across the town of
Oh, I
Milton,
see
which
they
is
are.
not very many.
Yeah,
Not
I'd
very
like
many
to
at
look
all.
at the larger map when we're done. so.
Absolutely. And then here's some of the areas that you'll see on the larger map that were talked about, just some of them, but we have Pine Tree Brook, pretty much the length of it, Milton Landing from the Neponset River, Unquity Brook, if I'm saying that correctly, Cunningham Brook, Trout Brook. So largely we're looking at stream-based flooding, largely what we would refer to as inland flooding driven by storm events. So then the next step, and this is going into what we're going to be doing in the next phase of this effort, is starting to look at existing mitigation measures. I already know, and you all are well aware, that Milton has done many, many things already in terms of existing mitigation measures, most especially in terms of your zoning ordinance with a floodplain overlay district. And you have wetlands bylaws, stormwater bylaws. So there's a number of things that are already being done. So we'll take a look at those. And then we develop a mitigation strategy from there. So there's really 3 primary questions there. Where are the gaps between what's already being done and the vulnerabilities we've identified earlier with our mapping exercises? What actions can we take to reduce those vulnerabilities? And then finally, we have to prioritize all of that into really just the high, medium, and low priority actions. Then this kind of comes out of our hands, and we pass it on to the state and FEMA, the federal government, to review. So the draft plans were reviewed by the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. Then they pass it on to FEMA. FEMA offers a conditional approval of the plan once they've reviewed it and found it to be approvable. The condition of their approval is that it come back to the town and be adopted by the Board of Selectmen. And once that adoption is complete, we send notice to FEMA and they issue the final plan approval, at which point the clock starts ticking for the 5-year renewal. And so the final step of this planning process is back in the hands of the town, and that's implementation and, in fact, preparing for that 5-year plan renewal. We recommend a variety of different steps in that, including having a staff-based implementation group that kind of tracks actions as they go forward and coordinates with other existing plans. In fact, that's one of the most important reasons we like to come and talk to the planning board, is that FEMA really likes to see these plans, and we recommend that these plans be coordinated with other planning documents and policy efforts engaged in by the town. So that's one of the primary reasons we're here. Public participation, the opportunities for the public to become involved are, of course, attending these meetings, and we're required to have 2 public meetings. And we intend to schedule the next one for a Board of Selectmen's meeting. The plan will be posted once we have a complete draft plan on the website, and I encourage those people watching at home right now to look for it on the website, and once it's been posted there, to review it and provide us comments. And again, on things like where they know hazards might be occurring or other ideas that might occur to them for reducing the town's vulnerability. So review and submit comments.
Is there a question?
Sure. And that's where we are.
Good.
There we go. Just in time.
My house is right under the approach to Logan Airport. I love seeing the planes come over, but what a potential hazard. I mean, it's
It's not a natural hazard.
well,
It's a
does it have to be
man-made hazard.
natural?
It does, in fact, have to be these plans are looking specifically at natural hazards. So,
Okay.
so no, we would not be addressing that in this plan.
What do you see as being the natural hazards that are most likely to affect Milton? You mentioned flooding, which is
And
obviously a big one.
Really is.
Forest fires,
Wind.
what else?
I saw you put your hand.
Yeah, Bill's all ready to answer
I
that.
can answer the question. When we went through and we said where all these sites are, we did this with the local emergency planning committee. The first plan that we had that was written 6 years ago was what allowed us to get money for the houses that got hurt back in the March and April storms, rainstorms.
Yep.
We had houses that water came into the first floor, the basements were gone. Because we had this plan in place, we were able to collect money to help those people. We were also able to collect money as a town to go back and pay for the police, the fire, and the DPW workers to fix our own infrastructure that was broken because of that storm.
Question, Bill? How did the public know that they could make a claim to the town for some of that damage?
FEMA came to town and we had them on TV. They were on all of the Boston channels. We had it on our website.
So that's in addition
we
to
were
the
going-
FEMA money that people were able to collect.
FEMA was
This
going
is a
door to door,
different.
ringing doorbells, knowing
It's the
where these
FEMA money,
sections were,
right.
yes.
Okay.
How about the town money?
I wrote the first plan when I was with MAPC. I wrote 10 of these for the South Shore communities. I wrote this one for Milton. This is the updated plan that we're going through now. I met individually with the DPW, with the town administrators, with the selectmen, with the police, the fire, knowing where all of these sites were. We have a leg up because we have something to start with. These guys have that plan. All they're doing is filling in and updating everything that's there. A federal requirement is that when there is a federal a presidential declaration, to get to the money, you have to have this plan in place. So you have to have met X amount of public hearings. It goes through review by MEMA. It goes through review by FEMA. And FEMA does kick it back a couple of times. They look at some of the really minute things and kick it back to you.
But the money that you're talking about is the money that FEMA pays homeowners. Milton doesn't have this $500,000 that they can then, okay.
We apply to FEMA to get the money back. We keep our receipts that our
For town
DPW,
money, right.
fire,
Okay.
police worked this many hours.
Right.
And it is reimbursable by FEMA.
Yeah, you had said something about some Milton's money going to do
We
work
had to
in
pay the
private
firemen,
homes.
Right, but we had to pay the firemen to go and
I
do this
understand
work.
that.
Right,
We
but the
get
actual,
reimbursed. It's a
the actual
reimbursement.
Okay.
homeowner claims.
Homeowner
No,
claims.
We don't do
Okay.
homeowners.
That's
That's what I
FEMA does
thought.
that, but FEMA came out and met with the individual homeowners
Because we had this plan in place.
because the plan was in
Yeah.
place.
So-
There's that benefit, and I'll just add to that as well, and I referenced it in the FAQ, that Milton has also received in the past a total of $540,000 from FEMA to match town funds for specific mitigation measures. So items identified in the plan might have been, probably were infrastructure improvements, drainage projects.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So those projects were partially funded by FEMA because this plan was in place. So projects show up in this plan, you can then apply for grant money to FEMA to fund these projects once the plan is in place and approved.
I think the easiest way to understand why to do a project like this comes down to a storm. We've had a coastal storm. Town of Marshfield had repetitive losses of $160,000. During the same storm, the town of Situate, which is right next door, which didn't have this type of plan, it was $6 million. So the town of Marshfield had done all kinds of pre-mitigation work. They raised their houses, they raised the utilities, they put in self-regulating tide gates. They got money from the feds, and you only get a small amount, but that small amount translates in the end that it saves you if you spend it early. If you have to wait for the storm, I get $160,000 that they pay out in one storm to one town, $6 million in the town next door because they didn't do those retrofits. I mean, it just shows you why you should do it.
So a couple of questions, back to my earlier one. Wind, Pete mentioned, water, what other primary things are likely to damage, primary natural disasters are likely
We
to
have
affect
lightning,
Milton?
so we have fire.
Okay.
We have
Yep.
places that we cannot access easily with some of our fire trucks.
Okay,
We
so that would be a
have-
gap in what we can currently do?
Right, that's
Okay.
something that we're working on.
Okay,
We're coming up with an MOU between Quincy, Braintree, Randolph, Canton to address the Blue Hills. We're
Okay.
working with DCR.
great.
Since the switch from from MDC to DCR, a piece of that kind of let go, and MDC's not there to take up what they used to do. It's up to the towns to take up that piece.
So you're identifying gaps like that?
Yeah, exactly.
The fire issue, places that might have been flooding that haven't yet been addressed, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So, Now, you've talked sort of on a general town-wide basis, but are you also providing information to homeowners as to what they can do for their own houses? Or is it generally, your position is generally just on what the town as a whole can do?
Yeah, I'm going to look at what the town can do as a whole. I think a great mitigation measure, and that would be identified as a mitigation measure in the plan for the town to engage in, would be to do exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
To provide information and recommendations really to homeowners, business owners, and those sorts of things. Yeah.
This type of thing where we say the town has taken these steps that affect your area. Here's what else you can do to make yourself even safer.
Could be. Yeah.
And you have that larger map for us to look at?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're interested in that. And then what other steps? So this will go to MEMA, FEMA, back to the Board of Selectmen, back to FEMA, and then I'm assuming...
Once the selectmen get it, they'll sign it, they'll send it back to FEMA. FEMA
Okay.
accepts it, and we're good to go.
Okay, and then will there be anything such as any zoning changes or anything that will be required to put in, or is it mostly for our support?
If there are zoning changes that you might want to add, you would do that before the selectmen sign off.
Okay. So they're not signing off on a plan that we then implement, they're signing off on essentially a management plan.
I
All the
imagine there
measures
could
should
be
already in place.
recommendations.
Yes.
There probably could be recommendations in the plan that they should consider adopting a certain kind of zone in this area or whatever.
Yes.
So again, this is the complete map, and again, it's a result of working with what we call the local hazard mitigation team, but which was the local emergency management committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same committee?
Yeah, it was
That
the
makes
same
sense,
group,
yeah.
absolutely. And the blue areas, again, we basically circled where we know, based on past experience, flooding has or can occur within the town. Red areas, again, which were areas with the experience of brush fire, and that one of those areas was the Blue Hills Reservation, certainly. And then again, the orange was areas where there was the potential for development or redevelopment in a 10-year time frame. And I think many of them actually have current development proposals or something along those lines already in place.
Governor's Road, is it Governor's Road?
Any questions on the map?
The Garden Road? No, Garden's over here, but that was the one that went underwater.
Yeah,
You got good eyes. What's that say?
the flooding map's
Which
really
one? That's
interesting.
Gulliver Street.
Oh, Gulliver Street. Where's that other dot? Right here. So they get
This
whacked
is Wollaston
occasionally.
Golf Course, so this is back, this road back there, Wollaston Road.
And I mean, I don't have the information with me, but the dates in which those happened, I think many of the dates are actually quite old as far as when the flood events that caused the repetitive loss actually occurred. I'd have to confirm that, but my memory says that they were relatively long ago.
Just another question. I hear the police chief talking about this on occasion. What if there was a natural disaster in Hyde Park and Dorchester and so forth, and the only place that people could evacuate is through Milton? Is there any way you can?
Well, again, we're not, this plan isn't going to really deal with emergency, or with...
A natural disaster caused something in Dorchester and Milton, so they
Right.
jumped over to Milton.
Yeah, evacuation routes are generally dealt with in the SEMP, the town's comprehensive emergency management strategy, or whatever it is. I'm sorry, plan, that's what it is. Comprehensive emergency management plan, and
CCMP.
the CEMP, which deals again with that issue of emergency response plans. How you're actually going to deal with an emergency event during and immediately following the hazard event. So the only aspect of evacuation routes we would deal with here is if you already have an identified evacuation route that you know runs through an area that floods. So we might identify in that case a mitigation measure to elevate the road in that place or reroute the evacuation route.
Like the canyon on the expressway, that would be
Right. But otherwise, we don't deal with evacuation routes in this plan.
Bernie, more than a couple of years ago, I actually got lost in Boston. It was an area that I was completely unfamiliar with. I'd been visiting a client, and I made a wrong turn somewhere, no GPS, nothing. I realized I was going south, and I saw the emergency management signs, the evacuation route signs. And so I followed them, the Boston ones. I followed them, led me straight to Milton.
Straight to
and
Milton.
you know, we don't have anything that says where you go once you get to Milton.
Neither
There were no
does-
signs to the hospital, there were no signs to any of the major routes. I ended up close to a residential street going,
Neither
well,
does the city of Boston have anything as to why those are on those streets.
exactly. It's just, I randomly just happened
What
to
a
spot a
mess.
sign.
This
This
and
is how
yeah.
you get out of
Like
town.
Baghdad. out there.
Exactly.
Closest way out of town.
Doesn't tell you where you're going or
It
why,
doesn't.
and I just ended up going, this could be
This is the
problematic.
way out of the
So,
city.
yeah.
They're all over the city. And they came when the Democratic National Convention was coming here. That's when they put them up. This is the easiest way out of the city, and they pointed. They don't have any other rhyme or reason.
So do you need anything else from us? I mean, we've been delighted to host you for your the first of the public meetings, so
And
thank
that
you
is-
so much for coming.
That is all I need.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, thank you very
You
much.
give this to Bill?
Actually, I'll probably take it back. Or Bill can keep it if
You
you'd
can give,
like. Would you like to hold on to it?
Yes, he would.
You're
He
welcome
wants to
to
spend
it.
more time
Bill,
with
can
it.
I borrow your blue pen? So we just have a
leave it.
document to sign
Take it.
before you all leave.
This is, no, we're not going to work. This is,
Has to be in blue?
It has to be in blue, or at least one of our signatures has to be in
Oh,
blue.
I see, I get it.
Bill, did you have a third copy? Do you have a
No,
third copy,
each of you
Diane?
has one in your,
Mine, that's mine, that's mine.
I can't have it?
Pete, do you
There's
have
one
your
right
extra
there.
copy?
Oh,
Mine got
yeah.
mixed up with a bunch of papers. Or Bernie or somebody with the extra copy.
Yeah. It's a letter. Let me see, where is it?
You see, Alex is making notes.
yeah, that's all right. All I need is the back page. You didn't get
All
the
right,
back page.
it's fine. Let me pass this around.
I have one thing that, in your packet is a letter from John Flynn.
Right here.
Oh, yes.
With the 36 Central Ave, just saying that he agreed with it.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Oh, no, we got it. We got a back page. Thank you, though.
I had a pen.
Eddie's passing out. I've got a black pen. Eddie's got Bill's
Hello.
blue pen.
let's take a look at that last page that you got.
Make sure it matches.
That one.
This
The-
one,
the
just to see
free
if they match.
Let me just take a look.
All right, take a look.
No, this is,
Okay, so send me that clean copy that's in front of you.
You starting over?
Just this one page.
Oh.
We're getting to practice our signatures. You know, mine's looking better and better the more I sign it. All right, while we're signing things, Bill, do you have anything to update us on, or not update us on, as the case may be? Just so we can,
I've been dealing with Green Communities Grant, the contract issues, the consolidated facilities database, wind turbine issues, 36 Central Ave, the final checklist, incidentals over there. East Milton parking, met with the with the Milton Chamber of Commerce, met with the DPW director, the Milton Police, and Howard Stein Hudson to go over the potential next steps for Phase 2 and the potential test for the hybrid plan. And then dealing with the planning board paperwork. I have it.
awesome. Is that all three ones signed there? Almost? Okay.
these will be filed tomorrow with the town clerk.
Thank you again. Bill, Alex is wondering if those will be filed tomorrow with the town clerk?
To Diane, please, yes.
Excellent.
Town clerk.
Do we have anything else for this meeting? If not, I will see you guys on the 11th for one item, and I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I know we don't even have to say what the motion is.